Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In the series of talks that we host on Thursday, today we have Lieutenant General A.B. Shivane amongst us, who will be giving the talk on notion of victory in the 21st century wars. Now I'll request Colonel Tushar to introduce the speaker to everyone.
Thank you, sir. Jain, sir. Lieutenant General A.B. Shivane, PVSM, AVSM, VSM, retired, is an NDA alumni and a decorated Armored Corps officer with over 39 years of distinguished military service. He is the former Strike Corps Commander and Director General of Mechanized Forces. As a scholar warrior, he has authored over 200 publications on national securities and defense matters. Besides, he has written 4 books and is an international renowned keynote speaker. The journal was a consultant to the Ministry of Defense Ordnance Factory Board post-superannuation. He was the Distinguished Fellow and held Chief of Army Staff Chair of Excellence at the Center for Land Warfare Studies in year 2001 and 2002. He is also the Senior Advisor Board member to several organizations and think tanks. Now I'll request Sir to please give the talks.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So at the very outset, I think I'll like to thank CENJOWS for this opportunity to speak on a very contemporary and relevant and topical subject which I had chosen, because the subject of the crisis of certainty which hounds the idea of victory in the 21st century is actually possibly as old as warfare, coming to Stone Age, and as new and contemporary as to the algorithm or the hashtag that made you read what you wanted to read along with your cup of tea this morning. What I want to highlight during my talk, or my key statement, is that wars of the 21st century today are no longer clear-cut victories, but they are prolonged contestations of influence, perception, and endurance. And that is where we need to understand the evolution of warfare and the notion of victory in the 21st century. And I'll take you through an example of this. Okay, so we go on to what we've been talking of Midnight Hammer, which became a turning point before the ceasefire came in. And look at the notion of victory of 3 players who joined in, each talking of their own victory. The media got the mushroom dust, the Pentagon got its footage, Israel nodded that are stuck hard, and Iran got a live test of its subterranean plutonium warheads or plutonium plant. And you go further, when the came about, actually there was no one who, or no one who lost, no victor, no vanquished. So, traditional style claimed that it was bombing for peace. Well, that's not very new for the United States. It did it in Second World War. It did it in Afghanistan. So this power with purpose, or it said was strength to induce peace, is something which needs to be taken with a pinch of salt as something not very new. He also spoke of his averted the nuclear war. And the second one very close by because he also, in a very traditional manner, took ownership of the India-Pakistan of Sindhu, which was also absolutely nonsense, talking of his hat. So he spoke of all these things in his traditional style, possibly the carrot of Nobel Prize hanging in front of him. But then, having said that, at least the war may not have ended, but cessation of hostilities had begun. Now look at Israel. The Prime Minister Benjamin, he said that I have destroyed two things. I have destroyed the nuclear threat and I have destroyed 20,000 missile threat. And what effect? Now the cost of his defense, GDP, has gone up to 8%. There's a 65% hike, which is so there is a cost of war, and there's a cost of focus. His focus was Gaza's focus was Lebanon loss, and of course Iran was always in the periphery, particularly its nuclear capability. So it's not possible for him to handle all the fronts together. But he took ownership and is the real one with all this. More importantly, after what's happening in Gaza and what the humanitarian crisis that is coming about, his stay was under threat, or his credibility was under threat. That has now been reinforced by this act. Look at Ali Ayomani, the Supreme Commander of Iran. Now, he says, I've won because I've countered the threats of America and Iran, Israel together. Two nations, and I've been able to stall them. Stalling for him is a victory. So, and his nuclear ambitions remain, and his regime remains. That is different. That cost of war was maximally felt by Iran with the inflation of 43%, which is coming in, where his economy has gone down to 0.3%. The real had dropped to 50%. So there was something for everyone, and there was some pullbacks and happiness for everyone in this game. That's the notion of victory that we're talking about. So my lines of effort today, will be based on four themes. Theme one is I will diagnose the strategic environment that has reshaped the conflicts of 21st century. Then I'll dissect the idea of victory and defeat from the Clausewitzian time to now. Then I shall discuss the notion of victory in certain case studies, including Indian and absolute also. And then I will describe to you how the Indian armed forces must be future ready in such an environment and what must be done in it. Now, before I start the first theme, there is a very famous historian. He's a radical scholar called Christopher Hill. I mean, those of you interested in, out of the box and out of the building approach, do read his radical ideas in this book. He's a 19th century historian. So, Dr. Christopher Hill, he was actually a Fauji. He was a military man. Then they shifted him to intelligence. And then when he started professing radical ideas and radical thoughts, the British thought that he had become a Russian spy. So their intelligence got after. But then they realized he was not. And look at what he said at that time, that every generation must rethink the understanding of internet. This is the time, this is what he said at that time. Now, when we look at victory today is a paradox. Either you can't live without it and you can't live with it. That's a paradox. Because you aspire for it, yet you struggle to understand and decipher it. And victory inspires, but ambiguity erodes it. And therefore, narratives prevail. Now, let me get on to the theme one. The question we need to ask, our model was winnable. Is this something known as a decisive model? You know, 3 or 5 decades back, I'd say 5 decades, look at our 71 war. 13 days, you divided the nation, created a new nation. Go to 1991. Go to Desert Storm. In 100 hours, the coalition forces attacked Kuwait, subdued the Iraqi forces. But that doesn't happen today. Look at Afghanistan, go to look at Syria, look at Ukraine. These wars are never-ending wars. And what do they come with? They come, today's wars, these modern wars are coming with a viral footage. They're coming out something known as an instant commentary which is going on. And therefore, there's very little consensus on who is the victor, who is the vanquished. So we live today in an era of wars as being persistent. And therefore, the ambiguity, that complexity that comes in, that victory just does not rolled around the battlefield. Not only the battlefield. Yes, major plays, but not only the battlefield. But we need to control narratives. The levers must be in our hand. We need to have control of the public mind's influence. And then only we will have deterrence restored. So let us look at what are the 21st century environment which is challenging this concept again. Look, there is something of the same, and there is a lot which is different. Nature will continue to be pervasive, but the character is evolving of warfare. Whether it's not only technology, whether it's geopolitical thing, all instruments of national power have to be weaponized. You've seen proxy state non-state holders, and you've seen multi-domain operations which are taking place. So today you have to fuse the battlefield professionalism with technology fusion and have narrative fluency. You have to have all three today. Boots and tracks on ground will continue to play a major role. There's no doubt in that. Technology, of course, is a force multiplier. It multiplies it. But operating at this intersection are that bullets and bytes are moving together and with equal velocity. In fact, bytes may be moving faster and with more effect. Similarly, missiles and missiles, probably enemies move faster and also with great effect. So that is what the sort of changes that is coming. Now, what is the impact? The impact is your compressed time cycle. Both the mounting tempo and the execution tempo has been churned by the magic of 4Ds, which I call digitization, digitalization, and disruption. You've seen the OODA loop compressor. Then we've gone back Earlier, we were in an era where there was mass application of forces. World War One, World War Two, maneuvers by strike, right commander to strike force. Right? At one, as a youngster, I have to always awe it over strike first. Look at mass employment of forces. But as I became a strike commander, I realized that I have to have battlefield effects by smaller groups who uh, get together at the point of decision. But I'm talking of the age of precise mass. You had in our mythology, Mahabharata, Vajras and divine arrows being fired and shields, divine shields. What are you seeing today? Swarms, AI-enabled swarms. They are the divine arrows. Counter-drone systems, missiles. So you are back in an era where, again, defining another 4 days. I'm sorry to tie down with a lot of tea in my thought process. But this is to deny this stuff, degrade and dominate. So you can have area of precise math which you need to be aware. And bullets and bullets I've spoken about the section. Stealth and decoys are redefining the signature. If you read today's uh, news, there is a news because on the Iraq war, which says that Iran had made decoy tunnels and decoy shelters to when they knew that these attacks were going to come on them. And actually, the attacks came there, therefore, their infrastructure and plutonium, which they moved out, I believe, remains something maybe set back by some time, but remains capability remains. That's the strength of decoys and stealth. And then you have a multi-domain operation, disperse, integrating, and get handling. So, in this game of conflict resolution, conflict initiation, conflict termination, there's a lot of confusion. How do we know we are at war? Do cyber attacks are not under Article 51? Who's participating in the war? Not just battle soldiers or non-state actors. Today, you've got hackers and influencers participating in this war. Who rules and governs the war? UN, in spite of now today again being 50 years of its, 80 years of its charter. But then it is today only a cheerleader. It has lost its steam, it's lost its cutting edge beyond lecturing, moral lecture. And when has the war ended? Because situation of hostility is there, but the information barrage continues. Whether it's of Sindhu, whether it's any other thing, today still feeling that. Now let me go on to the second thing, the site. Okay. Now you look at, I'm not going to get into this complex sort of a slide, but all that I'm going to say, when Clausewitz had defined the defeat mechanism, he had said there is a capability and there is a will which has a reciprocal effect. You dilute the capability, the will gets diluted. You dilute the will, the capability gets diluted. But what has emerged from this Clausewitzian thought today? That besides the center of gravity being the capability and the will, today the center of gravity is also servers and storytellers who are geography. They may be in Dubai, they may be in London, they may be in Karachi, or anywhere. No geographical limit, but they are churning the capabilities and they're churning the will. So strikes must weaken the capability, no doubt on that. But our algorithms must wreck his will. And our bytes must catch a new narrative. That is something that we in the 21st century must look at. Look at the levels of victory. Now, victory, if you go, it's like a staircase. You have to go from tactical brilliance to operational orientation and operational advantage. Then you have got to or operational overmatch. Then you got to go to military advantage. Then you got to have a strategic alignment, and then you have to political will or objective being attained. Now, in this, on the right hand side is a correlation of victory. The last three steps of the hierarchy top are where the complexity, elusiveness, and difficulty come in. Because it is here that the cognitive warfare comes into being. And therefore, we have to have all means synergize. The military means must talk of expediency of the military power being unleashed. The diplomatic means must shape the verdict. The psychological means must shape the perception. The economic means today has dual functions. Today, economic mean is itself a weapon. You've seen IWT, how we utilize it. And economic mean is also which ensures your endurance as such. And then, of course, technology helps you to win wars at least cost and at minimum time. What are the complexities of defeat and victory? Ignore the top half because who assesses victory, levels, assessment criteria, the temporal nature, subject to adversaries, acceptance, perception management, moral compass. These are all well known and understood. But what I want to highlight on the side is the scale of it. You know, like I said, about 5 decades back or even 3 decades back, there was a clear distinction. There's a defeat and there's a victory. Slowly, last 2 decades, the last 3 decades, we're talking about lose and win. Please understand the difference between the two. And then today, we are talking of I did not lose. The other guy says, I had an advantage. And we're narrowing down to stalemate. So this is the reality of the 21st century, scales being compressed with ambiguity. I think 2 or 3 rather. Let us discuss certain lessons from the war, which I've covered. And I'm going to repeat again that hardware alone has proved in all these wars cannot win as a strategy. You will win tactics, you will win battles, but when you come at the operation and strategic and the national, there is more to this effort, which has to be complemented. So the cognitive geography in 21st century wars and the lessons that come out is as important as the battlefield geography. The cognitive geography in the 21st century has to match the battlefield geometry. That is important. You look at Iraq and tactical overmatch, operational overload or overstretch, strategic underperformance, and narrative play. Look at Nagorno-Karabakh. Drones came in, a lot of stories came in, true and false. Technology was to the fore. Again, information warfare played a major role. Russia and Ukraine war. Here you saw a transition from the 4th generation warfare to the 5th generation. 4th generation talk of technologies, AI and all. 5th generation is talking of cognitive warfare. You see how that transition. And you saw that the industrial attrition was met equally with digital strikes and cognitive warfare. Now look at the Indian context. The first top 3 rows, I have tried to put in, get the data, may not be so accurate as whatever I could get from the open source and my sources as such. But what is important to understand, let's look at 65. The surrender accord was Tashkent Declaration. The perception in Indian this thing was favorable that we won the war, but then ambiguity of the Tashkent agreement came about because actually there was no war pact and Kashmir issue was not resolved. So what did we achieve? Perception in Pakistan was they had lost out. They agreed that they started the war. But then they said, we have not lost because India has not gained. International perception was, of course, a larger. Look at 71. 71 was an example of a decisive instrument of surrender, similar agreement with a question mark. A nation created, and it was recognized as a decisive victory in military warfare. And it was accepted as a defeat by Pakistan by anniversary. And the world opinion was an affair. So victory was complete. Look at Kargil. Ceasefire came in. Perception was favorable because from a position of disadvantage to capturing those heights which are near impossible from human point of view for any military, our tactical, brilliant, brave soldiers proved it and threw out the Pakistanis from there. So it was a case of absolute tactical brilliance. But what was, or raw courage, I would say, the day was saved by our frontline soldiers and frontline units. But then there is a lot discussed whether at the operational and strategic level was the discourse right. Therefore, the Kargil Committee also came about. Perception in Pakistan was, it was a misadventure by Pakistan military. And we stopped because US came in. So that is how it was. Look at India, China. 62 was a defeat, humiliation for us. There's no doubt in that. We were not prepared strategically, operationally, militarily. There were patches of heroism, and so they did well at the time. At the operational and strategic level, I think there were major lacunas. So it was a victory for China as such. And look at Galwan now. When that happened and this disengagement pact had taken place, but what is the concept of victory? Our concept was to reimagine that denying the PLA unilateral gain and status quo ante to April 2020. That was the PLA felt that after we talked of Article 370 and they got irked because of that statement of our Raksha Mantri, that they needed to send a strategic message to India and they needed to weaken India's growth in a regional environment. But the international was enough. Similarly, you look at Ukraine, Russia. It's very complex. There's so many players, so many proxies in it, and there's so many, bench sitters in this game. So without going into detail, because there are gains, losses, and national victory is very, very different. What one needs to expect that for Ukraine, it was survival and Western integration. They played actually a puppet in the hands of the Western world because it was a question of survival. For Russia, it was annexation and the NATOification as such. For US, it was weakening Russia and its influence. Because after the breakup of Soviet Union, they started realizing that this monster is again going to grow up and going to challenge them. So they have to do something about it. It's written a lot on this. There's a whole lot right from the Monroe Doctrine to the present time. There's a whole lot of correlation. The globe was happy because they were looking at it from the old. I spent a little time here. This is very interesting. Operation Sindhu. And in this Operation Sindhu, I have found the military escalation ladder to explain you the dynamics of notion of victory. To my mind, there were actually 13 steps of this ladder in Operation Sindhu. It's my perception, I've checked it. The first step was strategic communication and diplomatic protests. Second was economic measures like sanction and IWT. Third was covert intelligence and asset disruption. The fourth was cyber information warfare operations, including electronic mapping and preparation of the battle space. Then there was a cross line of control, artillery shelling, ceasefire broken. Then the precision airstrike, missile strikes on terrain infrastructure, the response came. The extended RT and rocket fire took place, drones came into play. And then you had the air and missile campaign against military target and strategic airfields, which put the red flag up for Pakistan. That was how from 22nd to 6th, 7th, shaping, preparation and shaping took place in various ladders. And 6th, 7th May to 9th, 10th, the operation took place. What possibly, to my mind, did not get across was 5 steps, which are maritime interdiction and naval blockade, short duration ground offensives in terms of integrated battle groups, going to areas which are particularly contested or certain areas, then a full-scale conventional war, nuclear signaling and strategic forces alert, and a nuclear threshold. So these are the 13 things. Now, what are the notion of victory? The notion of victory on 22nd of 22nd of April, when Pahalgam took place, the South still be attacked on innocent tourists by these terrorists. Pakistan conceived it as a win. Their proxy war having worked, they hope that a communal divide will take place. There, I was on one channel with one Pakistani guys, and they were just trying to expose that your intelligence has failed. They were not talking of anything of their own. So they have to be exposed that what a terror nation you are. So they said we have won. We said we have not lost. So we have now equated you. The KRF is coming out, your linkage is coming out, and we're going to hit back. So we are going to be, we are not going to do. Then came 7 attacks, 6, 7, 9, and attacks went in. So we said we have stuck terror installation 300 kilometers deep, 700 kilometers wide, and we've achieved our aim. We wanted to strike terror. Pakistan said we did not lose because they responded, and we still have many assets. I mean, they didn't say we have many assets, but they said we have responded. And you wage a war, we have responded. Then came night of 9, 10. We hit their 11 military bases, 11 military important targets, all important airfields. We crippled them. And then the Pakistan asked for ceasefire. But they said, we haven't lost. It's a stalemate. You hit us, we hit back. And then the ambiguity of who asked for the ceasefire. So that is the dynamics of today. So what is the notion of victory in Sindhu? See, Sindoor was an inflection point, a turning point in India's strategic thought process at the national level. Why? Because from strategic ambiguity, we went to an era of strategic certainty. From strategic restraint for which we were spoken of, we went on for strategic assertion. From shallow strikes, he went into deep and wide strikes. And what did we do? We made Pakistani's proxy war 1.0 model, and I'll tell you why I say 1.0. We made the Pakistani's proxy war from a low cost, high benefit to a high cost, low benefit model. That's the difference there. And deterrence reconstruct or deterrence reorientation. I said 1.0 proxy war because you are pretty certain you're going to see another shape of the proxy war. And there's going to be proxy war 2.0 model. And of course, Hindu 2.0 must also be prepared. Then you have a strategic messaging to the adversary and to the globe of the political will, the military capability, and the strategic communication that we want to give. Our own weapon system after they were got displayed, and the Chinese so-called weapons got exposed. For Pakistan, it was a question of survival, having been cornered, the surviving of success. They've been able to preserve proxy war infrastructure. I've been talking of we need greater precision because we don't have to hit the brother-in-laws, we have to hit the actually military leaders. Strategic friction was created but sidelined in Pakistan. And look at the global narrative and followed up there. This thing. They started getting fun. Security Council, they got change into the counterterrorism point. Now, my last slide. What should we do as a nation, and specifically as the army? How do we be future ready? How do we go to 2.0, 2.0? And mind you, and I this earlier, and I also informed the platform CDS. Ladies and gentlemen, was one model. The biggest difference in the known is China. Prepared for Sindhu 2.0, but also prepared for the 2.0. These are the and maybe integrated in all this Bangladesh 1.0. So we have to look at our kids very, very dynamically as they're evolving and do something about it. Politically, economically, militarily, diplomatically. So my first point is we need to right balance our capabilities. Kinetic versus non-kinetic. Contact versus non-contact. Man versus unmanned. And recently, I think your previous speaker, General Panwa. So both of us, as part of a 5 veteran committee, we were part of the Chiefs Committee on technology induction in the short time. Now, looking after drones and counter drone systems, particularly. But what I suggested that please, when you look at the acquisition equipment, besides the hardware, look at current. How are you going to balance the current and non-current? Start looking at your induction philosophy, which you've been speaking over the ages of threat come capability building. When I was at AGGPP, we were talking about that, and that time I had mentioned then Chief Jan Vikram that, sir, can we look at instead of threat come capability, can we look at capability come opportunity? Because if you are always on a threat come capability, you're always reacting to a threat and saying, he's got a light tank, I'll get a light tank. He's got a weapon, I'll get a light. Let me make him react. Let me look at my capabilities. Let me look at opportunities within and outside to get that capabilities which goes beyond the threat. So we need to look at our deterrence, which is based on, again, a reactive mindset which the British have left us, of punitive punishment, credible deterrence. These are, you're waiting for a threat and then you respond. We need to have deterrence based on denial and domination, preemption and proactive approach. What do you mean by denial? Our electronic systems, our look-through capabilities, our strike beyond visionary strike capabilities must psychologically deny and deter the adversary. He should be exposed, and we should be able to dominate him by our capabilities. That is the sort of deterrence that will work. Otherwise, we will always be, saying, thereafter we'll do this, and be surprised. We need to, again, a very different viewpoint, which has been deliberated and out with me. Sometimes very worst and CDM and other places where I've spoken of the discussion with the hierarchy. I feel that if we talk of geographical data commands, let's talk of functional data commands. Let's empower the resources. Let's use the resources. Let's have a cyber command. Let's have a space command, not division. C5ISR, not the C6ISR. Let's look at the structures. Can artillery division, the composite artillery brigade, you can have two-gun brigade and a composite artillery. But can we in the artillery division make it a strike force? Give the composite artillery brigade missiles and drones capabilities per sector and integrated with the entire sector. Do we need theater air defense integrated one for each theater? So functional integration is the prerequisite before we talk of the other things and the transition management and strategic communication. While our speakers from the defense, both the very professional ladies who gave us update, our three DGMOs spoke about. Excellent. No doubt on that. Hats off to them. I compliment. But are there some lessons we learned? A single price service voice. Maybe DGISP are also one. Look at now, after the ceasefire was announced, Secretary of Defense, Chief of the Joint Forces Command. They spoke. So therefore, do we need a DG Stat communication under the CDS? He comes in, Raksha Mantri or the Defense Secretary come in and they speak. Look at strategic communication at an apex level. Don't look at it at tactical level. That apex level strategic communication will carry much more weight. That we have to. So, Atma Nirbharta. You're fighting smart. Atmanirbharta also must be not smart. You cannot have technology cycle moving at 5x and acquisition cycle moving at 1x. This fact doesn't work. You have to look at reforms in our defense budgeting. We have to look at the envelopes of the defense budget. We have to invest in R&D. Maybe sometime later, but again, something which I've commented upon several times, that we have to graduate on to smart Atmanirbharta for the future aspect. Diplomacy. While we talk of look east, look west, Greece, China, all this. But what about the neighborhood first diplomatic policy? There seems to be COVIDs which are coming in and footprints of China taking greater influence and control. You cannot change your geography, but you can change the attitude of the neighbors towards you. Therefore, neighborhood first policy requires astute diplomacy and a real HR and professional military education. Times have changed from training, we must go on to professional military education. We must have a national security strategy and we must have a national defense university. That's strategic thinking and for thought leadership. Who will think strategically, who are technologically savvy, who believe and understand multi-domain operations, and who have got a creative and perceptive mindset for changing. I always in my talks or my presentation with a power statement. And today my power statement is victory is no longer about battlefield trumps. And it's not Mr. Trump, it is Trump. It's about dominating the mind, the messenger, and the domain line. And therefore we must rethink what does it mean to fight and win in the 21st century. So with that, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience and